Moments away, everyone, from Press Secretary Sean Spicer speaking alongside Budget Director Mick Mulvaney. They're going to be taking to the podium there any minute now to address the president's $1 trillion-plus budget unveiled this morning. The Pentagon's a big winner in this one, with an array of cultural programs, the EPA, medical research, taking some hits. And, of course, there's a down payment on that wall. We're going to talk about all of it. I'm Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. It is being called an America First budget blueprint to make America great again, with Trump tweeting out, a budget that puts America first must make safety its priority. Its number one priority. Without safety, there can be no prosperity. As I said, the military getting a big boost here when you talk about safety, to the tune of $54 billion. That's about a 10% bump, the largest we have seen since the 1980s. You got to go back to Reagan for this. The coffers for Veterans Affairs going up 6%, Homeland Security 7%. Some of Trump's favorite campaign talking points also in focus. Opioid treatment will get a $500 million increase. School choice programs, nearly $1.5 billion. So where are we getting all this money? Well, you got cuts to foreign aid and domestic programs. The State Department aid is going to be slashed by 28%. The EPA by more than 31%. That's going to mean a loss at the EPA of 3,200 jobs. The HHS will also be cut by about 16%. All money will be dropped from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the National Endowment for the Arts. Law enforcement agencies will be spared, but there will be other double-digit cuts seen across 12 of 15 cabinet agencies.
This is not a soft power budget like you saw with the Obama administration. This is a hard power budget. You got $54 billion more worth of defense. And yes, the soft power comes out of the State Department. That's exactly what the president wants.
Now the budget doesn't address taxes or entitlement programs like Social Security. The thinking is if those were to be worked in, they'd have to come later. In the end, Congress will have the final say, though. And like with health care, the opposition is not just coming from Democrats. Many Republicans are concerned about cuts to their districts. Others, like Mitch McConnell, are worried about slashing foreign aid. And then there are some on the right who think this doesn't go far enough, with House Armed Services Chair Mac Thornberry saying there's not enough money to repair the damage to our military. All right, joining me right now for a breakdown, Ashley Webster and Dan Mitchell from the Cato Institute. Good to have both you guys here. Dan, I'll start with you because I know the libertarian in you probably doesn't think this is quite enough, but I got to say, you're looking at a start.
It is a start, and if we can somehow get rid of subsidies for the National Endowment for the Arts and cut back on some of these international bureaucracies, I'll have a nice warm spot in my heart for what's going on. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter even if we zero out a lot of these wasteful domestic programs that are part of the swamp in Washington. If we don't ultimately deal with the entitlement programs, we're going to have a problem. And, oh, by the way, I wish Trump was cutting these programs to save money for taxpayers and not simply reallocating it to the Pentagon. All right,
but I want to talk about the good here for just a moment, because we have been looking at budgets that, frankly, have swollen for some of these pet projects of the previous administration, and while simultaneously, Ashley Webster, seeing that the budget for things like security, the Pentagon actually decreased. So this is about to reverse all of that. And, I think if you're concerned about security, as we should be, then this perhaps is a step in the right direction.
Well, the only three departments here that get a boost is Homeland Security, Defense, and Veterans Affairs. Now, Veterans Affairs have been long overdue some help monetarily. But I like these cuts. I really do. To the point of entitlements, that is critical as well. But when you look at it first blush, EPA, $2.6 billion cut. The State Department, $11 billion. That's 31%, 29%, respectively. It's really quite remarkable. But the federal budget has been bloated for a long time. Finally, we have someone who's going to come in here and say, this is what we're going to do. It's a good start.
Actually, you think about his background as a business owner, the kinds of choices he's had to make to see his company become successful. Those are choices that, frankly, government officials, they never have to make. And they only want to keep spending. It's easy, right, when you're spending other people's money. So now you got a guy in there who's like, we can do this differently. we can apply some discipline. My question to you is, how is this going to go over with all these Congress people?
Well,
that
it's
are
not going to go well, and you've already kind of said not only from the Democrats do you have opposition, but you have it from the GOP as well. Even from those who say it doesn't go far enough. Everyone has their pet projects. That's the problem in Washington. Everyone has their little add-ons. They're going to get the bridges built and so on and so on. It's going to take a lot of fiscal discipline that we've yet to see in Washington, D.C. for a long, long time. Can Donald Trump be the guy? Paul Ryan described him as a Ronald Reagan in his ability to schmooze and compromise. Well, he's going to have to work extra hard to get enough people on board to get these kinds of cuts put through.
Maybe I'm just an optimist, but in some ways, Dan, I think that he'll certainly have to perform the art of the deal, so to speak, with these members of Congress. But I think if there's anyone who can do it, he's certainly well suited to it. The other thing he has going for him, Dan, is the fact that he is so public about all of this. In other words, he'll get out there, and if a particular congressperson in a particular district is insistent on, keeping that EPA budget for something, he's going to call them out in a big way, and that might not be so good for the congressman. In other words, I'm talking about the bully pulpit here. How much could that pay off?
It'll pay off if he really uses it for the right reason. I mean, yes, it's good that he has the carrot of schmoozing, but he needs the stick of threatening their reelection. Yes. He needs to expose the fact that a lot of this so-called domestic discretionary spending, this is sort of the fuel that keeps the swamp of Washington going. You have all these former staffers on Capitol Hill and members who have become lobbyists. They get these contracts to get money out of these appropriated accounts. The current members love dispensing this money in exchange for campaign contributions. The whole thing is so incredibly corrupt, mostly for programs that shouldn't even exist in Washington in the first place. So Trump has made a great first start, but to get this over the finish line, given the inherent corruptness of Washington, is going to take a lot of bullying from that bully pulpit.
Well, I'll tell you, he's got the public on his side when it comes to these particular issues. They don't like the idea of Washington spending their money. I want to continue talking about this, but let me pivot right now because there's another big story going on right now, and that's that 2 federal courts have now blocked President Trump's second travel ban. You have a federal judge in Maryland blocking this order this morning after a judge in Hawaii rejected the Justice Department's claim that the ban was about national security, not religious discrimination, just last night. President Trump not taking these rulings lightly. Watch.
This new order was tailored to the dictates of the Ninth Circuit's, in my opinion, flawed ruling. This is, in the opinion of many, an unprecedented judicial overreach. The law and the Constitution give the president the power to suspend immigration when he deems.
He was talking about the Ninth Circuit. And then it almost sounded like circus, right? I mean, which it kind of is.
Well, it works, actually.
Certainly, yeah. Well, anyway, Donald Trump's right here because this law, written back in 1952, basically makes the point that, and I'll quote from it, actually, whenever the president finds the entry of any aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Ashley, I think it's pretty simple here.
Yes.
He has decided, for whatever reason, I mean, we look at these 6 countries and we know that they're lawless places that really have no idea who's in and out of the country.
By the Obama administration, indeed, too, by the way.
And so he's now saying, look, we need to temporarily suspend people from these lawless places that harbor terrorists from coming to our country. And he certainly has the power to do that.
He certainly does. He's acting within his authority. As Judge Napolitano said earlier today, it is not the job of these judges to decide whether the actions of the president are wise or prudent. That's not their remit. Their remit is the president properly authorized by Congress to take this action? And the answer is yes. They are, President Trump called it a judicial overreach. That's being kind.
But here's the challenge now. So you got the Ninth Circuit, which we were kidding. It sounded like circus, which, by the way, has been scolded by the Supreme Court itself for its desire to legislate from the bench and create the utopian world that they all think we should live in. And that's their version of utopia, by the way. So the Ninth Circuit out there trying to promote its view. Joining us right now, American University's Capri Cafaro. And Capri, as we watch this all unfold, I guess I would just ask you, what's next? In other words, if the Ninth Circuit is like, okay, you know, he has no right to do this, as they previously decided as well, does it then go to the Supreme Court? Do you anticipate that it will go there? And how does that go, given that it's missing a justice?
Exactly. I mean, we're really in a very difficult position. I think the Trump administration had the opportunity, which they took, to redo the original executive order, trying to navigate the challenges that were presented originally by the Ninth Circuit, and seemingly it has not, really remedied any of those issues. So now, they're sort of faced with, do they go back to the drawing board again, which I doubt, particularly given what President Trump said yesterday.
I'm just going to let me jump in for a moment, Capri, and just point out that this new version of it effectively changes the rules for any people from these countries, Ashley, these 6 countries. If they had previously been issued visas, we're going to honor those visas.
Yes.
So that was kind of a legal sticking point for folks before.
And green card holders, yes.
And the green card issue,
holders,
the green card issue as well.
Yes.
So that's all gone now. Donald Trump himself there on the campaign trail last night saying, the first order was pretty good. Maybe we should have stuck with the first order. I question where it goes, given this division in the court. He better work pretty aggressively to get Gorsuch in there so that he's got a vote on his side.
Yes.
Yeah, you agree.
I agree with that. I mean, and obviously we haven't really heard a lot about, the Supreme Court nominee and the nomination process. It's really been eclipsed by, the health care debate and certainly now this budget that has just come out. And so we really haven't heard a lot about it. But, I think a lot of folks thought that the executive order with the travel ban issue was put to rest with this new issuance. Obviously, it is not. And, the judge in Hawaii basically said that, it's regardless of what was going on with that 1952 or 1954 law that you mentioned at the beginning, Trish, that it's the executive order is still in conflict with the Establishment Clause because it is a de facto, ban, on religion. So I think that I don't know how you get past that unless you bring that to the Supreme
this is
Court
not a ban on religion, though,
action.
and I want to bring Ford O'Connell into the conversation. He's a Republican strategist as well, and the left is going to try and paint this as a Muslim ban, and it's not. It is if it were actually a Muslim ban, you'd be banning all Muslim countries, would you not, Ford? I mean, as opposed to just these 6?
There's 42 predominantly Muslim countries, and guess what? A lot of them are not on this list, and it's absolutely ridiculous to say. Let me say this as the only lawyer on the panel. What the Hawaii judge is saying is that Donald Trump is basically violating the Establishment Clause because he's allowing in statements that Trump made as a candidate, which should not be allowed in. It should be inadmissible because he's not a government actor at that point.
Yeah.
So if you actually make that fruit of the poisonous tree, guess what? Then you cannot infer intent, and you have to go by the letter of the law. Something else, Trish. The Ninth Circuit has been overruled the most by the Supreme Court in the last 10 years in an 80% clip. The biggest problem here is, and I don't care whether there's 9 liberal justices or 9 conservative justices sitting on the Supreme Court, the left knows this. How you frame a question in a lower court can determine the exact outcome. And unfortunately, the left is beating us to the punch on this point, because when Barack Obama became president of the United States, Democrats only controlled 2 of the 13 federal circuits. Now they control 9 of the 13 federal circuits. If I'm Donald Trump, what I really want to do here is I want to start going form shopping, find my own victim, have the 2 circuits, the 5th and the 9th, meet at the Supreme Court, and then guess what? He's going to win.
Look, I find it baffling that a judge in Hawaii, sitting way over there in Hawaii, somehow seems to know more about national security than the President of the United States, Dan Mitchell, who is being briefed on this daily by his intel ops. I mean, how is it that we're coming to a point where a judge in Washington, a judge in Hawaii, a judge in Maryland somehow knows more than the president when it comes to our safety and security?
Well, judges, in theory, are supposed to be doing rulings on the basis of the law and the Constitution. But there's really 2 questions here. Did the judge or the circuit overstep what their proper legal boundaries were? And then the second issue is, well, is Trump's underlying travel ban and travel restrictions and enhanced vetting, are those good policies? And I'm perfectly willing to believe that judges overstep, but I also wonder whether or not we're cutting off our nose to spite our face by hindering travel and business between the United States and other countries. I think we should be very careful to strike the right balance.
They're investigating 300 refugees in this country right now. Sure, Capri.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say in regards to, the commerce and this sort of thing, in underserved communities, without, the J-1 visas and the visas that enable individuals to come into this country that are trained to serve underserved areas like the ones that I represented for 10 years, like Ashtabula County, that had really no specialists. We actually had an issue at the Cleveland Clinic during the first travel ban where someone was detained and was having a difficult time coming back in. So, I think that there is something to be said about the implications of the travel ban on specifically medical professionals and how from these specific areas of the world and how that may directly impact recruitment.
Ashley, there are provisions that enable people to get waivers if they are of vital importance. It just seems to me we are right now, as we speak, investigating 300 refugees that are in this country right now. That was just announced a couple of weeks ago.
Listen,
if we're investigating people that we already let in, why are we going to let in more?
I am sure there are great students who can come here and do great things. I'm sure there are businesses who are suffering because of some of these travel restrictions that are being imposed. But that aside, what's more important, that or the security of this country? And until we can properly vet and properly figure out who these people are, where they came from, what their intent is, and I quite frankly don't know how you do that from these 6 particular countries where what kind of documentation, what kind of background can you get?
They're concerned about economic consequences there in Hawaii. I'll tell you one thing. If something bad happens in this country, the economic consequences are going to be a whole lot more severe than whether or not you got a particular professional or a particular student in and out of Hawaii at any given moment.
Well, absolutely right. Look, the liberals and the left always want to come up with a sob story here. But when it comes to national security, combined with the statutory authority of the 1952 McCarran-Walter Act, the president's authority on this, if he even just shows a rational reason, should be unquestioned by judges. But remember what's happening here. You've got 2 problems. One, you have the left's understanding of national security, and 2, you actually have political appointees on a federal bench who are going to push their political agenda over what the Constitution, the letter of the law, and the document says. We basically have a 3-way going the wrong way, and guess what? The left is enjoying every second of it.
And if something bad happens, there are political reasons for it. Hang on, Capri. Let me jump in because I think you can add some color to this. There are political reasons, are there not, for the left to do this right now? In other words, they want to undermine Donald Trump as a president. They want to see this blow up into a very big issue that effectively becomes a real question about who should be on the Supreme Court. So now people are engaged. The left is engaged. And for whatever reason, some members of the left feel that, okay, this is a Muslim ban and we've got to do everything we possibly can to stop it. And so I just wonder, from a political perspective, if this is entirely what the left is doing.
Well, I think there are 2 sides of this, Trish. I think certainly from my perspective, I certainly hope that's not the case because, and I recognize that we have political appointees on benches left and right. Elections have consequences, as Ford said. A lot of these folks are Obama appointees. That being said, everyone should be concerned about national security. Places like Saudi Arabia, for example, are not placed on this. I also understand the reason why they're not is because they have a functional government, unlike some of these places like Syria.
Yeah, I mean, Yemen, Syria.
To go back to your original question, I think that there are absolutely some members of the left or the progressives that are going to capitalize on this because, unfortunately, Democrats, from time and time again, and I've always been critical of this, we lose the opportunity to shape the debate. We don't provide our own ideas. What we do is we expect the other side to fail, and this plays into that. We're expecting to win in 2018, which I think is a bad strategy. We think we can win in 2018 if we take down Donald Trump. I think that's wrong. I think we need to actually bring our own ideas forward, focus on the economy, focus on some of the matters in this proposed budget, for example, which may hurt the most vulnerable Americans, and not be playing these games.
All right, let me... Go
Let me just say one thing. This is good ballot box politics for the Democrats. Here's my long-term concern for all of Americans. Should something blow up or something bad should happen, unfortunately, public opinion is going to shift so quickly without actually knowing what the president's authority is that bad things can happen. And that should worry all of us.
All right, I want to jump back to the budget for a moment. Stay with me, everyone. Jerry Willis joining us right now with a look at some of these cuts. How's it shaping up?
Well, let me tell you what I've got here. We took a look at those things you might not want to fund this time around. Are we spending every dollar on necessary items? No, in fact, we are not. Let me give you some examples here. There's a program called Classically Cannabis. This is a 3-chamber concert series in which you bring your own cannabis. It's called the High Note series, and it was in Colorado. Hey, Trish, I saved that for you.
You got to at least appreciate their sense of humor, right?
Yeah. And how about this? $5 million for students at the University of Tennessee to dress up as a fruit or vegetable to promote healthy eating. You like that one?
$5 million?
That's a lot of money. I mean, $15K, but $5 million?
How about
That's
$387,000 from the National Institutes for Health for Swedish massages for bunnies? Rabbits.
Wow. See, this one I agree with.
What's that?
This one I agree with.
You're all for that?
You
The
can't
bunny
have
deserves
tense bunnies. They need some
Swedish
time
massage.
at the spa. Wish I was a bunny.
You know, Jerry, it's crazy, but what you're doing, you're illustrating the point here that there are pockets, there are opportunities for us to be leaner and meaner. And we need to focus on that because, you know, the budget has gotten so out of hand. We are doing nothing but transferring, you know, a lot of problems to future generations. And unless we get a hold of this, you know, it's going to, at some point, I would bet, spiral out of control in a way that we can't recover from.
Well, Trish, how about leaner, meaner, and saner, more sane, right? This kind of spending is just silly. You're bargaining, betting on future generations, right? Can they make it out of this hole we're digging into them, digging them into? $20 trillion in debt, very nearly. This is just ridiculous. And ultimately, as your guests have all been saying today, we're also going to have to start looking at entitlements. The beauty of the Ryan plan is it actually looks at Obamacare and says, hey, that's an entitlement. What can we cut?
There you go. Medicaid. Ford O'Connell, you know, it's tough. Once somebody has something, it's challenging to take it away, and they're going to face that issue if they ever try and go after Social Security. But I often wonder, you know, why don't they say to the 25-year-old right now, guess what? You're not going to be able to retire at 65. You're going to have to wait to 70. What's wrong with telling a 25-year-old that now rather than leaving that person with nothing?
Oh, because it's bad politics, Trish. I traffic in cynical politics all the time. And let me say something else. We are just talking about a small piece of the federal budget. Former Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn used to talk about this all the time. The waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government's insane. If we actually want to fix spending and our out-of-control $20 trillion debt, we know eventually we're going to have to work with entitlements. But we can't even fix these little things like Swedish massages for rabbits because the left essentially never wants to cut anything and never wants to be fiscally responsible. And my guys on the right basically say, guess what? You can cut that guy's district, but not mine.
Yeah,
so
you know,
guess what? Nothing's ever going to get done.
And that's the swamp that he's there to drain. Capri, one of the things that frustrates me about the left, and I've had this argument actually with Gene Sperling, who used to be in the Obama White House, is why is it that the left always feels as though the budget, the government's budget, must grow alongside GDP? In other words, as much as our economy grows, spending must grow. To me, you know, if our economy is growing great, if I as a household am able to make more money, don't we want to save more of that money? Shouldn't the government want to be doing the same? Why does it need to grow in lockstep?
As you all know, I come from serving at the state level, and we're constitutionally mandated to balance our budget. So, I've never been in a government position where we had the luxury to just continue to spend whatever we had. I mean, we were very thrifty with the rainy day fund, for example. I think it's not about just spending to spend on, the litany of things that were just listed earlier, the bunnies and the vegetable costumes and the rest of it. It's about investing smart. It's about when you do entitlements, incentivizing through through pay for performance, for example, in Medicare and Medicaid. And when you take a look at this budget, and you know, again, I am not somebody to say we're going to throw good money after bad, but hear me out on this. There are a number of programs that are being cut that actually, I believe, will continue to impact vulnerable communities to their detriment. For example, community development block grants. Without them, you know, communities won't have sidewalks. That's being significantly cut. At the Appalachian Regional Commission, communities like Ashtabula County, again, that I represented, would not have access to infrastructure for broadband and telecom without it. And let me say this: things like the USDA program for water and sewer.
Yeah.
Without the USDA program for water and sewer, the people in Austinburg, Ohio, the people in Kinsman, Ohio, wouldn't have had the opportunity to have their ability to have sewer and water to flush their toilet.
I hear you, but, you know, I think that people can be pretty creative, and I think private industry can step in, and a lot can be done with less. We certainly learned this in the Live Free or Die state in New Hampshire, where there is no income tax, no sales tax. You have to be a little creative. We're going to take a quick break. We're still waiting on Sean Spicer, who's going to address reporters next. Okay, breaking right now. We are waiting on White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, who is set to brief the media any minute from now. Meanwhile, earlier today, the House Budget Committee approving the Republicans' Obamacare replacement bill, sending the legislation one step closer to reaching the president's desk. Our own Peter Barnes joins us with more on all of that right now. Peter, very quickly, we got the panel still standing by, and we want to get to Spicer.
Yeah, it was very close. Committee approving this legislation 19-17 with 3 conservative Republicans, Bratt, Sanford, and Palmer, voting against it because they favor a tougher approach to repealing and replacing Obamacare. A tie vote would have stopped the process. The Speaker said onward, while Democrats again said stop.
We feel like we're making great strides and great progress on getting a bill that can pass because it incorporates the kinds of feedbacks from members from all walks of life in our conference.
It's a fraud. It's a sham. It's a charade. It's a Hollywood-style production that will destroy health care in America. First, Trump Care will directly lead to millions of Americans losing their insurance.
Legislation is now over at the House Rules Committee, Trish, which will then figure out the rules of debate and all that before they actually send it to the floor for consideration by the full House.
All right, Peter Barnes, thank you so much. I want to turn back to the budget right now. That's what we are anticipating. We're going to hear some commentary on there from Sean Spicer and the director of the OMB. I'm here with Ashley Webster, Jerry Willis, Ford O'Connell, and Capri Cafaro. I'll start with you, Ashley, because one of the biggies here is the National Endowment for the Arts. He's going to cut it. He's going to do away with it altogether. That includes the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Sesame Street?
Sesame Street. Can you imagine?
Elmo's getting the cut?
I got to tell you, I feel a little bit sad about that because I grew up on Sesame Street. But as a mother of 3, I can tell you, kids today, they're not so into Sesame Street because there's so many other choices out there from an educational perspective. And I think Sesame Street lost its edge. It didn't need to compete, Barney.
No, it didn't. That's absolutely true. You know, that's going to be one that will come up. How can you take down Big Bird and all the rest of it? But it is what it is. And this would include, I believe, NPR, right?
NPR? I mean, you're going to... So it's about $1 billion. And it's not the most in the world, Ashley. I mean, $1 billion, right? But it means something, right? In that we're saying, okay, no more frivolous stuff.
Why are we supporting you and your views?
Ford, what do you think? I mean, I'm sure you grew up on Sesame Street as well. So, you know, there's some nostalgia there. I feel bad about losing it. But as I said, you know, kids today, they've got a lot of choices. And I don't know as you have the same need for something like PBS that you once had.
You know, look, I grew up on Sesame Street. Unfortunately, you're dating me here, and I try to pretend.
Hey, I dated myself. We're equal. Okay?
Yeah, I try to be a little bit younger than you throughout
right with you, Ford.
But let me say this, though. There's a lot of things like this out there, and frankly, there's no incentive in Washington to be fiscally responsible, no matter what the item is. And this goes back to the entire budget process. If you're an agency or a department and you don't spend your budget, you don't get to carry it over next year like you would, say, in the private private sector. You lose it. And then guess what Washington says? You can't do it again. The biggest problem here is that there's no incentive for fiscal responsibility, whether you think we should keep Sesame Street. Heck, I would actually agree with Dennis Kucinich on something, and I'm a big military spender. I'd actually like to see the Department of Defense audited, because Lord knows we're wasting a lot of money there, even though it's a job.
Well, you know, look, and the F-13 fighter pilot program, 35, forgive me, is part of that, right? I mean, Donald Trump's saying, look, we need to be more aggressive about how we spend. And even if defense gets more money, they need to be held accountable. I hear you on that, Ford. I think that there needs to be some accountability, and it's challenging to do, given that, you know, for a lot of people, this is just some big blank check. Capri, I come from a music background. I studied classical music, opera, in fact, and I still love going to the opera. But I got to tell you, I don't think that you as a taxpayer need to help subsidize my opera tickets. I don't think that you as a taxpayer need to be giving money to that. And again, I'm a big fan of the arts, but I think that if, you know, it should be able to stand on its own 2 feet.
You know, this is a really tricky area because, you know, there are statistics out there that show that investments in the arts and exposure to the arts lifts all boats in regards to cognitive ability and performance in math and science. But honestly, I'm going to leave this issue aside, because for me, what's more important are some of the cuts related to, for example, to weatherization, to HEAP, to Meals on Wheels, to, you know, senior employment programs. You know, if you can't heat your home, if you don't have, you know, food stability, how are you supposed to expect to get it? How are you expected to get a job?
See, this is where it's going to get challenging, Jerry. This is what the left is saying, right? Jerry Willis, this is what we're going to keep hearing. Somehow he's stealing from poor people with this new budget.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
You know, look, here's what's absolutely true, is that we have lots of programs on the books already that have been funded and are going nowhere, frankly. They're not going away, that support people who are poor, who are destitute. Even in the area, you know, we talk about Obamacare, what's going to happen with that, and what are the Republicans going to do with it. What do you think SNAP is? What do you think, you know, the program to care for children is?
These are
what do you think
examples.
Medicaid is?
No, you can tick them off one after another. Okay, quick break, and we're back right after this. All right, just a reminder, we are waiting on Sean Spicer, who's going to talk to the press. These are always very interesting.
What do you think he's doing backstage right now? He's a little lazy, but they're just kind of, okay, what if I get asked this question?
He's dotting the I's and crossing the T's. You know, I think, by the way, Ashley Webster here with me, Jerry Willis, Ford O'Connell, and Capri Cafaro.
He's writing, don't get angry. He has to say it 10 times a day.
He's going to try and spare himself from being on Saturday Night Live again this weekend. Although he's kept a good sense of humor about it all. You know, Ford, the reality is that room is stacked with a group of people that do not fundamentally really agree with what the White House is trying to do, whether it's on budgets or whether it's on this temporary travel ban. How difficult does it make it for someone like Spicer?
Well, no, it's absolutely incredibly difficult for Sean Spicer. Look, there's no question about it. The Democrats want Trump's head. They want him out, whether he's impeached or to resign. So that's just Trump himself, who Spicer represents. Then you actually have the mainstream media, that's the White House press corps that's there too, that actually agrees with the Democratic Party and is hoping that they're going to slip up every which way possible. I have never seen more biased coverage focused on one White House in the history of media. And trust me, it doesn't make Sean Spicer's life any easier. It's extremely tough, especially when he has a president who wants to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it, and that's why we elected him.
It amazing? You know, actually, they're talking about things like impeachment. We've heard Maxine Waters use that phrase a couple of times.
From the very outset, before he'd even taken a breath.
Amazing. I spoke to someone yesterday who's pretty middle of the road, who said to me, gosh, I hope that they're not, you know, I hope he's able to make it 4 years. And I thought, wow. The media has really gotten to you. You know, how much does the media affect overall perception?
Well, it does, because if you start talking about it, thoughts become fact. We were talking about that earlier today. I was amazed. Maybe I was naive, but I couldn't believe the extent to which the mainstream media was in bed with the Democratic Party when those emails were leaked. I was absolutely horrified that they were saying, look, here's the question. I've just written this about your candidate. Do you like it? And I'm absolutely stunned.
By the way, just as a journalist, we're both journalists, and I can tell you that ethically, that is just not something that you ever do. You don't send a copy of a story ahead of time. Go ahead.
That's really tough. Is the Democrats wisely, for political reasons, engage in end-of-times rhetoric. And then what happens is it carries over to the press, and they basically engage in an innuendo festival. Did you hear Rachel Maddow with respect to Trump's tax returns? By that 20-minute wind-up, I think she asked whether or not the moon landing was real. I mean, at some point, I wanted to go out there and get Trump myself, and I voted for him.
Capri, I'm glad you agree that it's ridiculous. That was ridiculous over on MSNBC. And I'll tell you, this is what people do not like about the media, the tease, right? So she teased the audience for better than 20 minutes, only to basically have nothing.
Pull a Geraldo.
Say nothing.
Capri, so, this is part of what's wrong with the media in general. I'll tell you, this is why people don't trust the media.
That's true. And I think on both sides of the aisle, and what happens with, sort of the echo chamber that people can select the news outlets that they want to read. If you want to live in a world where you only watch MSNBC and read the Huffington Post, or Think Progress or the Young Turks, you can do that. And you will have a totally different worldview than somebody that, reads the Washington Examiner or watches Fox News or Fox Business, or somebody that, only watches CBS Evening News and reads the New York Times. That's really unfortunate because at the end of the day, our media, our journalists serve a very, very important purpose to educate the public, for the public to utilize those outlets to educate themselves and to be unbiased. And we really have seen an erosion of that over the last
We certainly have. I'm glad you mentioned Fox Business and Fox News. We take a lot of heat sometimes, Ashley, because people don't think that we have they have a perception, right, of what Fox they think is. But we make a very concerted effort to make sure we have that debate. I mean, Capri's a longtime Democrat. And a good friend of ours, and she comes on and she makes sure that all sides get articulated.
We do that with all the major issues out there to that point, and I always feel very good about it. A spirited debate between two sides is always important. If we just had experts or commentators on one side, it wouldn't be accurate.
And the other thing I would just add to that, I don't know as I speak for you or others here, people have different political allegiances, but I'm an independent. And my philosophy on all of this is I want what is good for our economy. It's pretty simple. As a business journalist, lower taxes, less regulation, that adds up to
less
good things
government
for our economy. Yeah, Capri, get in. I know you wanted to say something.
Well, and Trish, if I could just for a minute, as the Democrat here right now on the program, I come on Fox News and Fox Business, and I am a contributor for the Washington Examiner because I believe it's important for Democrats to engage with maybe viewers and readers that may not necessarily share their viewpoints. If we have a civil dialogue, if we're able to exchange ideas in a meaningful way and not just through talking points, we can really, I think, move the ball forward. Because as you said, Trish, we want things that, we all kind of need to be independent and do what's best for the country.
Couldn't agree more. And, Capri, I wish more Democrats were like you, because I've been absolutely stunned by the vitriol and the anger and the aggression of the other side, those opposing Donald Trump. I thought the Democrats are supposed to be the more compassionate, kinder, gentler party. The Republicans were the rich meanies. But it turns out that that's not true if we don't agree with the Democrats. And I, too, am an independent, by the way.
Actually, let me tell you, the biggest myth in the last 10 years in politics is that the Democratic Party is the party of tolerance and compassion.
Right.
They're only tolerant and compassionate when you agree with their point of view. If you disagree with it 1 inch, you're done. And let me say something else. My guys on the Republican side haven't been good about listening to everybody, but you'd be surprised. We get crushed because we seem to be a little bit more homogeneous with respect to ethnicity, but the irony is we have a more diverse set of views than the Democrats have, and half the time that spills out into the public, and that's what gets us hemmed in on a lot of these things, just like you're seeing right now with Obamacare.
Well put. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we are back. As we've been saying, Sean Spicer facing a pretty hostile room. We'll see how hostile it gets today. We'll see you right now in 2. Okay, still here, still waiting for Sean Spicer and the director of the OMB. There are plans to make some pretty big budget cuts in Washington. At least that's what Donald Trump wants to do. He promised to drain the swamp, and we've got evidence that he's working on it anyway. Still with me, Ashley Webster, Jerry Willis, Ford O'Connell, and Capri Cafaro. I think that one of the things that people are most frustrated with, Ashley, when it comes to Washington is this sense of bloated government and the fact that they don't feel like it can ever change. I do think that this was a really fundamental reason why he went to the White House.
Yes.
And here he is delivering on what he promised to do. And so for those members of the left that are freaking out and saying, my goodness, we're going to lose Sesame Street, I mean, this is what he promised. He promised an increase in spending for the military, and he was going to get rid of all the things we didn't need that may be seen as superfluous.
And he got elected on that, and here we are, and he's making these difficult decisions. But it's what the country wants. The faith and the belief in lawmakers up until Donald Trump began running was terrible. It was down, and I hate to say this, down with used car dealers, who I'm sure are wonderful people. But, you know, when it comes to rating people, lawmakers were right down at the bottom. You know, it frustrates me. The other thing that always frustrates me, we're talking about money, where are we going to get money? I was just making some notes, and what about the $9.2 billion that the Obama administration sprinkled liberally in the UN in their last year in office? And then I think about, what about that suitcase of money that went to the Iranians? Overall, $1.3 billion in cash was given to Iran. I think of those things. How frustrating is that?
You know, Jerry Willis,
we could build a wall with that money.
You know, and by the way, the wall would be a big infrastructure project. So regardless of what you think of it, if you're on the left and you like infrastructure projects, because many members of the left do, you'd think they might be a little bit less hostile to the whole construction project. Anyway, very quickly, Jerry, what Ashley's talking about is he's setting up sort of this really this fundamental difference in the way the parties operate in terms of spending, because things like the UN or some of the aid that we give, foreign aid, that's going to now be challenged.
Well, I got to tell you, the Democrats, they look at this as other people's money. It's OPM, right? Whatever. It's just government dollars. Wherever it goes, doesn't really matter. We can spend what we need to spend. And we saw this over and over again in the Obama administration, the abused spending at the IRS. At GSA. Remember all of those scandals in those agencies? What you find when you go cover those agencies is there's all kinds of employees, and right on the tippy top is whoever the president appoints. Making those agencies change is difficult, very difficult, takes a lot of effort. Trump's got a big job ahead of him, but, you know, the difference is he has a vision, and I think that's what the American people responded to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Very quickly, Ford, I just have 20 seconds.
What I was going to say is, as we have these daily battles, Donald Trump with the media, with Republicans, with Democrats, I just hope he doesn't lose sight of the bigger picture, which is his job is not to be the president of the Republican Party or to be a doctrinaire conservative. His job is to get things done and put people back to work.
I think that's his goal. And if he does that, I don't know what the media is going to say then. All right, quick break again. We're back with Sean Spicer after this. Okay, as we wait on the press secretary for the Trump administration, along with the head of the OMB, I'm joined by Ashley Webster, Jerry Willis, Ford O'Connell, Capri Cafaro, and, you know, a couple big stories obviously going on in the news today, one of which is this budget that we've been talking about and the challenges that he'll face in terms of making some of these cost cuts. And the second is the travel ban. Hawaii coming out just last night, a judge there, and saying that this was unconstitutional. That, of course, is part of the Ninth Circuit, the good old Ninth Circuit. Ford, how would you sum up the Ninth Circuit?
I would say of the 13 federal circuits, it is by far and away the most liberal. It covers California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii. You're talking about the stronghold of the left, and frankly, they are the poster child for judicial activism. They are more interested in pushing their political agenda as presidential appointees than they are in being constitutionalists and interpreting the law the way it should be done, and I think it's hurting America.
There's a tendency, a growing tendency. Oh, it's getting the shot right. There we go. Very good. A growing tendency for, and I would say this is quite recent, Ashley, for a lot of these attorneys and judges to really, and you think about law schools, right? And how liberal these law schools are. And so they graduate these attorneys who go on to become judges who feel that they can remake the world as they see fit.
Well, they're interpreting the law based on their own, how they see the world. We all do that. We're all biased because of our experiences. But when you're looking at the letter of the law, it should not be that case. As I said before, what President Trump has decided with this travel ban and this rewritten travel ban It's not up to the judges to decide whether it was wise or prudent or the right thing to do. It's like, does he have the authority given to him by Congress to do what he's doing? And the answer is yes.
Yes. No, that was decided back in the 50s.
Exactly.
That he had that authority. And it does seem to me, as I was saying earlier, if you're the President of the United States and you're getting intel briefings that caused you to believe
you know a
that
whole lot
America
more than
could
the
be
judge.
at risk. Exactly. You
Yeah.
know a lot more than that judge sitting off there in Hawaii. Anyway, thank you to the entire panel. Ashley, you're going to stick with me. We're going to be right back. I have a clarification to make.
Yes.
You know, I should know this with little kids. Sesame Street was sold to HBO. Some of the viewers.
I knew it was airing at HBO, but they put, well, then Elmo and Bert and Ernie, they live on.
Well, it explains why,
HBO.
I'll tell you, I don't let my kids watch HBO, so there,
There
you go.
All
right, we're still waiting on Spicer. We'll see if he shows up soon. He may be happening with